His lawyer leaned in and whispered just 5 words. 5, and suddenly Mason's confident, untouchable smile, the one I'd stared at across countless family dinners, school events and business launches, vanished entirely. His hands shook as he held the papers he'd been itching to sign, trembling like leaves in a storm. And me, for the first time in 3 years, I allowed myself to smile. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand how we reached this point. The 15-year marriage that everyone thought was perfect, the painstakingly hidden truth, and the quiet, calculated plan of a woman everyone assumed had lost her mind. My name is Clara Hawthorne. I'm 34 and until 3 months ago I was married to Mason Lancaster. 15 years, longer than most Hollywood marriages survive, longer than some countries have existed, and far longer than my patience could have reasonably endured. But I inherited stubbornness from my mother, and maybe a little from my grandmother too. I met Mason when I was 17. I had just graduated high school early, not because I was a genius, but because I was practical and ambitious, eager to escape my parents' house. I landed a job as a file clerk at Reynolds and Pierce Law, minimum wage, maximum paper cuts, but it was mine. By 18, I had worked my way up to legal assistant. I was meticulous with numbers, quietly observant, and learned the invaluable skill of saying nothing while seeing everything. Mason was 24 when we met at a networking gala. Charming, ambitious, and dazzlingly confident, he spoke of his plans like the world was already his to conquer. A real estate empire. I said I'd help him fill out the paperwork. Romance, right. We married when I was 19. Our son Ethan arrived when I was 20. I kept working part-time while raising Ethan, saving every dollar, building my 401k. My grandmother's words echoed constantly. A woman should always have her own money. Not secret money, just her own. By 23, Mason's empire finally took off, or at least appeared to. He asked me to quit my job and run the operations of his business full-time. I became his unpaid everything: office manager, bookkeeper, client liaison, decorator for model properties, marketing coordinator, event planner. I did all this while raising Ethan, managing our home and keeping meals on the table. My official title, wife; my unofficial title, everything else. For 11 years I poured myself into Mason's dream, and for 11 years he reaped the accolades. At award ceremonies I was Mason's wife. At every toast he thanked his mentors, his team, his vision, but never me. And then slowly things changed. Mason began making decisions without me. He stayed later at work, criticized my cooking, my wardrobe, my lack of ambition. I was running his entire back office for free, raising his son and keeping his life in order, and yet not ambitious enough. Then 3 months ago he dropped the bomb. A Tuesday evening, I was cooking dinner, his favorite of course, because I had apparently developed a habit of unappreciated effort. He sat me down, his expression flat cold. "I want a divorce," he said. "And I want the house, the cars, the business, everything. You can keep Ethan," he added as if he were placing a side order at a restaurant. I just stared. 15 years, and this was how it ended. At the kitchen table, sandwiched between the salt shaker and the butter dish, like I was just another disposable item. What I didn't know then, and wouldn't discover until later, was that Mason had been planning this for months. Lawyer ready, exit strategy mapped. I had been blindsided by a man I trusted with everything. His mother, Victoria Lancaster, arrived the next day, perfectly coiffed, perfectly practiced sympathy. She patted my hand. "You should have tried harder," she said. "Men have needs, dear." Of course, she spent her own marriage avoiding her husband's company as much as possible, but sure, I was the problem. The first week was a blur. Mason moved me to the guest room, my closet shrank, my furniture, my personal items were sorted by Victoria as acceptable to keep or marital assets, all of it packed in garbage bags like trash. I had one ally, Elena Carver, my friend since high school, 20 years of friendship. She came over, brought wine, let me cry, but I noticed little inconsistencies. Mason always seemed a step ahead. Comments about neighborhoods I considered renting, casual questions from Elena about how Mason was doing, all pointed to a betrayal I hadn't yet seen. Elena had been his spy, my closest friend loyal to Mason, perhaps promised a future together. And then there was Ethan, my son. He saw everything. He absorbed the girlfriend in my home, the grandmother packing my things, the casual cruelty, the manipulation. And Mason worked him too, dripping poison subtly. "Your mom is making this difficult." Ethan started pulling away, not angry, just confused, and I realized I could lose the house, the money, my son's trust. But here's the thing, I had a secret I had been quietly, patiently holding for 3 years. 3 years ago, I discovered Mason's financial truth. One late night, I went through the company accounts, something I had done countless times before, and noticed transfers to unknown accounts, loans against everything we owned, debts hidden in plain sight. I stayed up until 3 a.m., tracing every transaction. By morning, I knew the terrifying reality. House, 3 mortgages totaling $1.1 million, market value $850,000. Business, $480,000 in loans, unpaid taxes, vendor debts. Vehicles, $115,000 in lease obligations. Lifestyle and hidden expenses, $320,000. Total debt, roughly $1.9 million. Total assets, $1.6 million. Net value, negative $300,000. Mason's empire, a house of cards with every card borrowed and the whole thing on fire. And I had my grandmother's inheritance and my personal retirement account, untouched and completely separate. Total, $520,000, untouchable, for Ethan's future. I did nothing at first. Confronting Mason would have risked my assets and alerted him to my knowledge. I set up an irrevocable trust for Ethan, carefully documented everything and waited. I knew Mason would eventually demand everything, and when he did, he would sign his own financial doom. 3 years of patience, 3 years of observing him dig a deeper hole, 3 years of pretending to be oblivious. When he finally demanded the house, cars, and business 3 months ago, I almost laughed. He wasn't asking for assets, he was asking for debt. I handed 3 binders to my lawyer, Nina Castellano, 11 years of documentation, mortgages, hidden accounts, loans, everything. Her expression shifted from skepticism to awe. She said, "Mrs. Hawthorne, I owe you an apology. I thought you given up." And the trap was set. Over the next 3 months, I perfected my role, the defeated, heartbroken wife, mediation sessions with trembling hands, red eyes, meek requests. I asked for $50,000 cash, my personal belongings, shared custody of Ethan. That was it. Mason agreed immediately, smiling at the supposed victory. He relaxed, stopped guarding himself, posted on social media, flaunted his girlfriend, redecorated my house, all while digging the hole deeper with his own hands. He didn't read the fine print. He didn't need to. He assumed his win. And the night before the hearing, Mason texted me, "Thanks for not making this ugly." I replied, "I just want what's best for Ethan." Thursday, 9 a.m. courtroom, 4B, sunlight streaming through tall windows, the smell of polished wood. Mason entered first, confident, Armani suit, new $15,000 watch glinting. Brittany waiting outside, Victoria in the gallery. I arrived minutes later, simple navy dress, hair in a low bun, looking like a woman who had nothing left. Perfect. Judge Patricia Holden presided, 30 years on the family court bench. She read the file, glanced at us. Mercer versus Mercer, final dissolution hearing. I understand the parties have reached an agreement. Mason's lawyer, Harold Whitfield, confirmed the asset transfer. Nina Castellano confirmed my minimal settlement. Judge Holden studied me. "Mrs. Hawthorne, you understand this agreement. You are relinquishing substantial property voluntarily." "Yes, Your Honor," I said softly. Signatures were placed, pages turned. Mason barely glanced at the liability disclosure addendum. And then reality hit him. Mortgages, loans, debts, obligations, total $1.9 million, negative net. His confident smile evaporated, hands shaking, Harold whispering, "You're assuming all liabilities." Vincent's panic cycled through confusion, rage, and finally realization. "You knew," he croaked. "I was your bookkeeper for 11 years, I said calmly. "I knew everything." Judge Holden confirmed the agreement was final. Mason got the assets, I got my settlement, but it was debt, not riches. I walked out, my son understood without explanation. My trust fund safe, my future secure, and I finally had what I had been waiting for 3 years, freedom. The courtroom door closed behind me with a soft thud that felt heavier than it had any right to. 15 years of my life, meticulously devoted to Mason Lancaster and his empire, had officially ended in the span of 30 seconds. Outside, the sunlight cut through the tall courthouse windows like a promise of freedom, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I inhaled it fully. But freedom alone is not justice. Patience alone is not revenge. I had spent 3 years carefully preparing every contingency, building a fortress around Ethan, my son, and myself, while Mason blissfully dug his own grave without ever realizing it. Mason staggered out minutes later, shoulders slumped, suit rumpled, and the gleaming watch he had recently purchased glinting mockingly in the morning sun. His new girlfriend, Vanessa Hart, clung nervously to his arm, her designer heels clicking nervously against the marble floor. He had expected triumph. Instead, he had stepped into a trap he hadn't even seen being set. Within 24 hours, the consequences began. Bank calls, vendor complaints, overdue mortgage notices, and emails from creditors demanding immediate payment flooded his inbox. The empire Mason had flaunted at cocktail parties, the properties he had shown off as his own, the luxury cars, the lavish trips, all illusion. Debts stacked upon debts, hidden liabilities he had never disclosed to anyone, now legally his responsibility. I had anticipated this. Every move, every potential loophole, every desperate attempt to escape. My savings, my inheritance, my IRA, all legally secured and untouchable in a trust for Ethan. Mason had nothing to claim except the avalanche of debt. Meanwhile, Ethan, perceptive beyond his 15 years, sat at my side. His small hand found mine in the quiet of our new apartment. "Mom, he's really in trouble," he said softly, eyes wide. "Yes, sweetheart," I replied, stroking his hair. "But it's not just trouble. He's about to learn a lesson he never expected, a lesson about honesty, accountability, and respect." He nodded but said nothing more. At that age, understanding can be silent, observation can be louder than any lecture. Mason's downfall was swift. Within a week, headlines screamed across social media and news outlets. Real estate mogul declares bankruptcy, Lancaster Holdings crumbles. CEO overextended, hidden debts revealed. Ex-wife walks away clean as empire collapses. Investors pulled out, lines of credit were frozen, leases on properties he claimed as his own were cancelled, employees whispered about unpaid salaries and vendors prepared to file suits. And Vanessa, she vanished. When she realized the fortune she had imagined was actually a facade, she quietly left Mason to face the consequences alone. Calls, emails, and even legal threats poured in, but I did not panic. I was prepared. Every attempt to intimidate, every message laced with anger or false claims was carefully documented. Nina, my lawyer, watched everything with sharp precision. "He's digging his own hole faster than most of my clients ever have," she said dryly. And indeed, Mason was unraveling, in ways that were both satisfying and chilling to witness. Meanwhile, Ethan and I slowly settled into a new routine. Our apartment was modest with 2 bedrooms and a small kitchen, but it was ours. Every morning, Ethan would wake early, prepare his own breakfast and help me with small chores. I enrolled him in a new school where he could be a kid again, not a pawn in a corporate chess game. I began pursuing my own dream, interior design, part-time courses at the local community college, learning everything from color palettes to space planning. Every evening, I would sit at the tiny dining table, surrounded by boxes of my old life, and plan designs for my first clients. I started with small projects, but each one gave me the confidence that I could reclaim the life I had paused for Mason's ambitions. Ethan watched this transformation with awe. "Mom," he said one evening, "I think he's scared because he finally sees what he did wrong." "Yes," I replied, smiling softly, "but he's not the only one learning. You, Ethan, are seeing how patience, observation, and integrity matter more than wealth or power." He beamed, and I realized this was the first lesson I had wanted him to learn. Justice isn't about vengeance. It's about wisdom, preparation, and ensuring the people you love are protected. Desperation made Mason reckless. He tried to liquidate a property to cover debts, hoping for a quick cash influx. I had anticipated this. Through careful legal oversight, I ensured that none of his attempts to manipulate the system would succeed. Each sale, each auction, each negotiation fell through. He was trapped in the empire of his own making, and every failure reinforced the lesson he had never expected to learn: shortcuts and deceit lead to ruin. Within weeks, bankruptcy filings confirmed the full scope of his collapse. The house he had claimed as his own, underwater by more than $200,000, business accounts defaulted, vendors and contractors filed lawsuits, employees were leaving, and for the first time Mason realized that no one was coming to rescue him. He called me. I answered calmly, sitting at my desk with a cup of tea. I didn't mean for it to end like this, he whispered. I know, I said softly. I never wanted it to end like this either, but honesty matters, Mason, and accountability is non-negotiable. He was silent, unable to articulate the truth he had avoided for years, and then he hung up. Ethan, ever the observer, pieced it all together himself. One evening we sat on the tiny balcony of our apartment, watching the city lights flicker. Mom, he said, kicking a pebble along the ledge, I think he finally understands. He sees that he can't hide anything anymore. Yes, baby, I said. And it's important for you to see that actions have consequences, whether people realize it immediately or not. You don't have to wait for justice to happen for others. You learn to protect yourself and the people you care about first. He nodded thoughtfully, squeezing my hand. You waited 3 years, he said quietly, just to make sure everything was safe. Yes, I replied. Patience is a weapon and timing is everything. He hugged me then, not the quick, distracted hug he sometimes gave, but a full, heartfelt embrace. It was acknowledgement, pride, and love all at once. And in that moment I knew the patience, the planning, and the quiet observation had all been worth it. Chapter 6, Mason's final realization. Within 2 months, Mason's reality had fully set in. Banks called daily, creditors filed lawsuits, vendors refused service, his employees had walked away. The business he had flaunted, that he had claimed as his own, was crumbling. And Vanessa, gone, she had realized the facade and quietly disappeared, leaving him entirely alone. He tried one final desperate maneuver, calling me, begging for help, offering money. I listened calmly, noting every word. You don't understand, he began, voice shaking. I understand perfectly, I said. You made your choices, Mason. I only made mine when it came to protecting what matters most. He hung up, and this time there was no recovery, no comeback, no escape. Ethan and I continued building our life. My interior design work expanded. My first clients became my ambassadors. Each project reinforced the lesson I had learned over 15 years. Value yourself, know your worth, and never sacrifice your future for someone else's illusion. We painted, we organized, we built, we laughed, we cried, and we healed. The trust fund, untouched and secure, grew steadily. Ethan knew that no one could take it from him, and more importantly, he knew his mother had always been watching, always planning, always protecting him. Months later, Mason appeared at the small cafe near our apartment. He looked unrecognizable, thinner, worn, haunted, dark circles under his eyes, the expensive suit now wrinkled, the gleaming watch gone. He approached cautiously. Clara, he began, voice trembling. I know, I said. You're facing the consequences, and I hope you understand them fully. I didn't know it would be like this. I didn't mean for... You didn't mean for anything, I said, calm, almost compassionate. But intentions don't erase outcomes. You chose greed, deceit, and arrogance. You built your empire on sand. He turned, defeated, and left without another word. I sat later that evening, alone with Ethan in our tiny living room. The boxes were finally unpacked. The apartment, though modest, felt like home. Mom, Ethan said quietly, I get it now. You were patient, you waited, you protected me. Yes, baby, I said, smiling. Sometimes the best victories are quiet, unseen, and slow, but they last. Mason's empire was gone, his debts insurmountable, his life changed forever. My life, on the other hand, was finally mine. The sage-green kitchen, the second-hand furniture, the quiet peace, it was all real. It was all mine. And I knew, without a doubt, that I had not only survived, I had thrived.